Notes also that for a country with a foreign reserve of only $45 billion and a sovereign debt profile of over $80 billion, this judgment debt is not only punitive but would devastatingly affect the Nigerian economy. Aware of the fact that Nigeria has a penchant for disregarding the sanctity of contracts and terms of agreement, coupled with the failure of Nigeria's representatives in most cases to carefully or diligently scrutinize agreements they sign, knowing that the consequences will affect past and future generations. Aware also that Nigeria had entered into a gas supply and processing agreement with the P&ID Limited in January 2010 through the Ministry of Petroleum Resources, with the understanding that Nigeria will supply natural gas, wet gas, at no cost through a government pipeline to P&ID's production facility, while P&ID in return will construct and operate the facility, process the wet gas, and return to the government of Nigeria lean gas for generation of power at no cost also. Further aware that 2 years down the road, P&ID had not built any gas plants to which Nigeria could supply wet gas processing, signifying in the first place that the move to arbitration was opportunistic and grossly self-serving, cognizant of the fact that the matter went before an arbitration tribunal under the rules of the Nigerian Arbitration and Conciliation Act 2004, with London, England as place of arbitration, and affirming its jurisdiction in the matter, the tribunal began hearing to determine whether or not there were regulatory predatory breach of contract. At this point, there was an attempt by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources to reach a settlement agreement with P&ID Limited to the tune of $850 million.
Honorable members, please resume your seat. This is a very important motion that we are taking. The speaker should not be distracted, please. Honorable Koko, Honorable Kalu, please resume your seats.
All right, I go on, Mr. Speaker. Alarmed that the agreement was somewhat shrouded in secrecy and as such apparently dubiously procured, as those who ought to know about its existence did not, and more importantly, the relevant laws in Nigeria for the transaction to be consummated was not applied, Part 4 of the Bureau of Public Procurement Act 2007, which deals with the fundamental principles of procurement. Further alarmed that it took the new government more than 4 months to respond to the vital arbitration judgment of about $6 billion, with a ridiculous excuse that there had been a change of administration in Nigeria, and the ministers, including the Attorney General, had only just been appointed, thus asking for an extension of time to act on the outcome of the arbitration tribunal. Alarmed that rather than engage P&ID in the matter before the tribunal with robust legal arguments and interpretations, Nigeria was busy shopping for a favorite forum to plead a case in a court in Lagos, Nigeria. Worried that the lack of diligent prosecution of cases in which Nigeria is involved by those whose duty it is to do so is due to a tendency to either politicize everything or focus more on personal interests or failure on the part of all parties involved. Observe that Judge Butcher J., the judge in the matter, in his August 16, 2019 ruling, made heavy weather out of the several acts of omission on the part of Nigerian authorities, especially when he noted, and I quote, the Federal Republic of Nigeria had remedies for many procedural unfairness but did not utilize them, unquote. Nigeria could have objected to the procedural order number 12 or questioned the final award. In the words of the judge, quote, it did neither, and the time for doing so is long past, unquote. These are serious indictments of the competence and gross negligence displayed by our representatives, agents, arbitrators in this matter. Further observe that this embarrassing judgment exposes
Honorable Mike, please resume your seat.
Exposes a deep decay in our governance and leadership structure with far-reaching implications for the credibility of the country's capacity to handle business and legal process. Resolves to: 1. Mandate the House Committees on Justice and Petroleum Resources and other related committees to, as a matter of urgency, invite both ministers involved and other officials of the ministries saddled with the responsibility to negotiate the agreement with P and ID and the prosecution of the matter before the tribunal to give situational reports on the matter and explain the lapse in judgment of time and due diligence in the mishandling of the case with a view to finding lasting solutions to the avalanche of extant and future cases. Recommend appropriate sanctions where necessary without fear or favor or preference for status in line with Order 14 of the standing rules of this House. Initiate a process for reviewing all agreements and treaties signed by Nigeria through the appropriate committees to create opportunities to discover anomalies and avoid a repeat in the future. I so move, Mr. Speaker. So I suspect that the appropriate will be for us to refer it to the relevant committee. But if we want a debate on it, I am prepared, fully prepared. Huh? It's investigative. Mr. Speaker, sir, we said it is a motion calling for investigation. But if you want us to debate it, I think we're...
Yes, I think even though it's investigative, I think the nature of the motion or the substance of the motion requires to add some flesh to it and some debate. It's on the front burner. We need to talk about it. So go ahead and just take 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of us in this chamber know the state of the Nigerian economy. Some of us here have suffered greatly. Some of us here are under pressure daily from our constituents. Some of us here have tried to even get some facility from banks to run businesses without success. The issue we are raising in this motion, we are not looking at the issue of jurisdiction, whether the case ought to have been in London or in Nigeria. We are not looking at the question of attachment, whether the court that ruled actually had the authority to so do. We are not looking at whether the P and ID breached the contract in the first place because they did not use any gas facility to which Nigeria would supply wet gas, so that going to court was opportunistic. We are not looking also at whether Nigeria surrendered its immunity in this case. Neither are we looking at whether the issue of sovereignty, national sovereignty that is involved, and to what extent a judgment could be given in London, and a motion also moved that there could be an attachment of the properties or assets belonging to the country. What we are looking at actually is how did this happen? Who was involved in this business that has led to this quagmire? Adeni wrote an article recently and said that nobody in the hierarchy of the Yar'Adua government knew anything about these contracts with P and ID. We also have seen an article recently classifying the character involved in this business as a shady character who was involved in running from one ministry, one government to the other, entering into deals that he will not execute in order to lay claims of breach. Mr. Speaker, our country is in trouble. $9 billion It's almost 35 trillion naira. We know what that can do for education, what it can do for security, what it can do for health services. Our rural areas all across the country are in their need of basic needs, but we can't provide them. We say there is no money. But now, a court has hung $9 billion, almost 35 trillion naira, on our necks. Our call is to investigate this, to find out who were the characters who went into this deal. Did they carry out due diligence? And the prosecution, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Justice, how could a permanent secretary inform a court that had ruled against the country that they could not respond or do anything because ministers had not been appointed? It's an insult to the integrity of the officials in that particular ministry. And the permanent secretary involved with that, we need to investigate how come, what is going on in the ministry. Mr. Speaker, there are hundreds of other agreements like this. And in our standing orders, there is provision that these agreements should be brought to the National Assembly to be vetted. This is never done until when the consequences. We know also there are other hanging agreements with Mambila. There are some with global infrastructure where we breached agreements or we refuse to comply with the terms of an agreement. And at the end of the day, we are running from pillar to post, hiring lawyers abroad, paying them heavily just to see if we can survive a problem we have created with our own hands. Mr. Speaker, finally, unless we investigate this matter deeply, we find out the characters and actors and the institution involved, we try to save the name of our country. We don't even have the foreign reserves enough to pay off this kind of debt at once. And when they move against us, it will be very, very embarrassing. Interest is accruing daily on that $9.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, this is an urgent matter, a serious matter. I think the House should take it as it is. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker.
I represent the fantastic people of Ede North, Ede South, Egbedore, Ejigbo Federal Constituency of Osun State. Mr. Speaker, I also want to add my voice to that of the mover of the motion and those who have spoken in support of the need for this House to diligently and expeditiously look into the issues surrounding this death judgment that was obtained against the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But in supporting the motion, Mr. Speaker, I also want to raise the fact that we have a responsibility as a parliament to ensure that the laws that are passed by this House, motions passed by the House, are not just, treated anyhow at the level of implementation. Every country is governed by laws, and contractual obligations are governed by the principles in the laws of contract nationally and internationally. And I'm sure from the little that I have read in the media about events which led to this very unfortunate judgment being obtained against the country, that there must probably have been some lapses at the level of the executive, right from the administration that initiated the contract that eventually went bad. As much as we need to focus our attention on finding out what went wrong and trying to see how we can mitigate the situation, I think it is more important for us to find a means of ensuring that there is no repeat of such going forward as a country. Every single day, as a government, as business entities, we enter into contracts. And we are meant to obey the terms of the contract we enter into. But where, unfortunately, contracts are awarded or entered into without due regard to international best practices and without due attention to details as well as the best interest of the country, you have situations like this arising. So my point, Mr. Speaker, is that while I support that we have a body, just as suggested by my friend Honorable Ben Kalu, of members of the House of Representatives to investigate what went wrong, we should also, in whatever we're going to do, ensure that we bring forward measures to prevent a future occurrence. If there are lacunas in our laws that the parties involved here exploited, we should find a way of amending those laws. If there are administrative, negligences that resulted into this, we should identify those who are responsible, whether they are in or out of government, and take stern actions and measures within the ambit of the law against them, and of course put in place mechanisms that will prevent this happening going forward. That is my submission, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Koko.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I represent Koko Bese Mayema. Mr. Speaker, I am from Kebbi State. Mr. Speaker, sir, respected colleague, I rise to add my voice into the debate with regard to the 9bn Judgement. Mr. Speaker, contract has entered. Arguments must be abided by. Government functions, government go. And there must be compliance, there must be an agreement compliance on any contract entered, either nationally or internationally. Mr. Speaker, I strongly agree with the amendment made by Honorable Ben that the House should constitute an investigative ad hoc committee to look into the matters. Who goes wrong, from which side, what really happened. Nigeria needs to know what really happened. In addition to that, Mr. Speaker, those who refuse to do what they are supposed to do, they should be brought back to book, and Nigeria should know what really happened. On what Honorable Professor said, really something happened somewhere, but Nigeria needs to know what really happened. Who is at fault? What really happened? 9.something billion is not a joke. They are trying to take our foreign reserve from the judgment debt. But what really happened, we want to know, Nigeria needs to know. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Moji.
Mr. Speaker, Honorable, pointing out that this is a very serious issue. That if care is not taken, one day we wake up to see that somebody has signed up the sovereignty of this nation. It's very painful that it is coming at a time when we are borrowing to finance our budget. And then our foreign debt is increasing, we don't have sufficient funds. We're also trying to know how we can increase VAT and taxation to muster enough money to finance the budget we have in the nation. And then we are now having to deal with the issue of a judgment debt of $9 billion. That's a very heavy amount. And if care is not taken, and if there is no adequate investigation, and if there is no punishment for such infractions, grievous things will still happen in future. We recount how somebody clandestinely submitted Nigeria to the International Judicial Court for the Green Tree Agreement. Because of the outcome of that judgment, we lost the Bakassi Peninsula. Because Nigeria had an option not to have joined, not to have submitted itself to the International Court. So this is another example of somebody misleading the nation into signing on behalf of Nigeria an agreement that we are even beginning to discover that the company in question has no known address. So if proper investigation is conducted, I think a lot of things will be unraveled. And then we move for a decisive punishment to form a deterrent for future infractions. So, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion and also support the setting up of the ad hoc committee. But this is a cancerous problem that we need a very immediate solution. I so submit, Mr. Speaker.
Members, I adopt the submissions made by the Honorable Professor, the sponsor of this motion, and wish to further add that in view of the controversy and the secrecy involved in the execution of this contract, as rightly averred in the body of the motion and then the prayer sought for, there is need for an investigation of this matter with a view to unraveling the issues concerning this matter. But I want to also wish to further add that in view of this act of omission or commission that led to Nigeria incurring this judgment debt, there is a need on the part of us as a country or as a government for diligent prosecution of all cases involving government, so that we will not be taken unawares and then will be landed into this unfortunate scenario. 9.6 billion naira, dollars, is not a small amount of money. It's going to do a lot of good for this country in view of our infrastructure deficit that we have in this country. So there is the need for diligent prosecution of all cases involving government, so that we will not be in this type of circumstance. Thank you.
Thank you. Honorable Luke.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Honorable Luke is my name. By the grace of God, with the support of my people, I speak for the people of Etinan, Nsetibo, Nsurubium Federal Constituency of Akwa Ibom State. Mr. Speaker,
and these issues were begging for questions, begging for answers from Nigerians. These issues were discussed in our broadcasting houses. We had a detailed comment about these issues. One was the xenophobic attack of Nigerians and other Africans in South Africa. And the other one is the issue that has been captured today by that motion raised by Professor Julius Ihombere. Mr. Speaker, the taking of these issues goes to show that this House under your leadership had lived to the promise of being on the side of Nigerians and always sharing in the yearnings and aspirations of Nigerians in addressing the issues that bother them daily. Mr. Speaker, $9.6 billion would put a hole in our foreign reserve. $9.6 billion would put a hole in our economy in a time like this that we are borrowing to be able to service our budget deficit. So, Mr. Speaker, this issue raises so many questions that I believe that only an investigative panel that will be able to answer or lead to us answering these questions. Number one, Mr. Speaker, the PNIDL played their own part in the performance of this contract. We all know for a foreign company to be able to come into the country to execute any contract or to do any services, they must be able to import capital. Has there been evidence of capital importation by PNIDL into this country? And is there any certificate of capital importation into this country? Those are the questions that's one of the questions that
Speaker, to be able to look into this matter. And I believe that we will have this, I mean Committee on Justice. Committee on Justice, not judiciary. Committee on Justice, sir, to be able to look into this matter. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I believe that at the end of it all, the committee would bring a clear position whether this company was a portfolio company, whether there are people who are behind it, and then whether this contract was actually entered into validly by the federal government of Nigeria. Those are my humble submissions, Mr. Speaker.